Hello everyone, my name is Jay Rice and welcome to this video teaching on the flood of Noah. I encourage you, if you haven't done so, to hit the subscribe button down below so you can be notified of future content. In this video, we're going to be looking at different evidences concerning the flood, but we're mainly going to be focusing on the cultural aspect of the evidence of a global flood. If you ask most children who are somewhat familiar with the biblical account of the flood how many animals of each kind Noah took into the ark, and the answer you will likely hear is two. Genesis 6:19 says, "And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring two of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." It seems that fewer people, however, are aware that God also instructed Noah, saying in Genesis chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, "You shall take with you 7 each of every clean animal, a male and his female, 2 each of animals that are unclean, a male and his female, also 7 each of birds of the air, male and female, to keep the species alive on the face of all the earth." According to Bible critics, these verses are contradictory. Are clean beasts to enter by twos or by sevens? The clean beasts and birds enter the ark by sevens, while the unclean animals went into the ark by twos. There is no contradiction here. Genesis 6:19 indicates that Noah was to take 2 of every sort into the ark. Then, 4 verses later, God supplemented this original instruction, informing Noah in a more detailed manner to take more of the clean animals. It was necessary for Noah to take additional clean animals because upon his departure from the ark after the flood, he built an altar to the Lord and took of every clean animal and of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Refer to Genesis 8:20. If Noah had taken only 2 clean animals from which to choose when sacrificing to God after departing the ark, then he would have driven the various kinds of clean beasts and birds into extinction by sacrificing 1 of each pair. Thus, after God told Noah to take 2 of every kind of animal into the ark, he then instructed him to take extras of the clean animals. Here's another neat little nugget. Keep in mind that every word, every letter, every number that you see in the Bible is placed there for a reason, a specific reason. Genesis 8:4 says, "And the ark rested in the 7th month on the 17th day of the month upon the mountains of Ararat. For 40 days and nights it rained so hard that the whole world perished, except for Noah and those who were with him in the ark. At the end of 150 days, on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat." In Hebrew, the word Ararat means the curse reversed. The waters of judgment receded, causing the ark to rest on the mountains of Ararat, on new ground where the curse is reversed. And it happened on the 17th day of the 7th month, on the Feast of First Fruits, which is the exact date that Jesus rose from the dead 4,000 years later. Moving on to the actual flood itself, did you know that there are at least 270 cultural stories about a global flood? Anthropologists who study legends and folktales from different geographical locations and cultures consistently have reported one particular group of legends that is common to practically every civilization. Legends have surfaced in hundreds of cultures throughout the world that tell of a huge catastrophic flood that destroyed most of mankind and that was survived by only a few individuals and animals. Although most historians have studied this matter estimate that these legends number into the 200s. According to evolutionary geologist Robert Schoch, Noah is but one tale in a worldwide collection of at least 500 flood myths, which are the most widespread of all ancient myths and therefore can be considered among the oldest. Schoch went on to observe narratives of a massive inundation are found all over the world. Stories of a great deluge are found on every inhabited continent and among a great many different language and culture groups. Over a century ago, the famous Canadian geologist Sir William Dawson wrote about how the record of the flood is preserved in some of the oldest historical documents of several distinct races of men and is indirectly corroborated by the whole tenor of the early history of most of the civilized races. Legends have been reported from nations such as China, Babylon, Mexico, Egypt, Sudan, Syria, Persia, India, Norway, Wales, Ireland, Indonesia, Romania, etc., composing a list that could go on for many pages. Although the vast number of such legends is surprising, the similarity between much of their content is equally amazing. In 95% of the more than 200 flood legends, the flood was worldwide. In 88%, a certain family was favored. In 70%, survival was by means of a boat. In 67%, animals were also saved. In 66%, the flood was due to the wickedness of man. In 66%, the survivors had been forewarned. In 57%, they ended up on a mountain. In 35%, birds were sent out from the boat. And in 9%, exactly 8 people were spared. Let's take a look at some of the American Indian legends concerning the flood. The Aztecs tell of a worldwide global flood in a story with striking parallels to the biblical deluge. Only 2 people, the hero Coxcox and his wife, survived the flood by floating in a boat that came to rest on a mountain. Then, soon after the flood, giants constructed a great pyramid in an endeavor to reach the clouds. Such ambition is said to have angered the gods, who scattered the giants with fire sent from the heavens. In the ancient land we now refer to as Mexico, one tribe of Indians known as the Toltecs told of a great flood. In their legend, a deluge destroyed the first world 1,716 years after it was created. Only a few people escaped this worldwide flood and did so in a Toptlipetlocali, a word that means closed chest. After these few people exited the closed chest, they wandered about the earth and found a place where they built a zakwali, or a high tower, in case another flood came upon the earth. At the time of the zakwali, the Toltecs' languages were confused and they separated to different parts of the earth. Another ancient tribe of Mexico told the story of a man named Tespi, who escaped the deluge in a boat that was filled with animals. Similar to Noah, who sent out a raven, a scavenger bird, that never returned, and a dove that came back with an olive leaf, Tespi released a vulture, which stayed away, gorging on cadavers. Then he let a hummingbird go, and it returned to him bearing a twig. Now that we've explored a little bit of American Indian legends concerning the global flood, let's take a look at ancient Greek mythology. According to the Greek legend of the deluge, humans became very wicked. Zeus, the leader of the many gods in Greek mythology, wanted to destroy humans by a flood and then raise up another group. However, before he could do this, a man by the name of Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha were warned of the impending disaster. This fortunate couple was placed in a large wooden chest by one of the immortals named Prometheus. For 9 days and nights, the floodwaters covered almost all of the earth. Only a few mountain peaks remained. The wooden chest came to rest on the peak of Mount Parnassus. Later, after leaving the wooden chest, Deucalion sacrificed to Zeus. Let's look at some Chinese and Asian legends. In the land of China, there are many legends about a great flood. One of those comes from a group of people known as the Nosu. According to their legend, God sent a personal messenger to earth to warn 3 sons that a flood was When the waters arrived, Doom entered his boat and was saved. After the waters began to recede, the boat landed on the mountains of Tibet, where Doom had 3 sons who repopulated the earth. Interestingly, even the Chinese character for boat possibly reveals the story of Noah and the other 7 people on the ark. The 3 elements used to symbolize a boat are as follows. As you can see here in Chinese are the characters that make up the word boat. Going from left to right, the first character is vessel plus the character for 8 plus the character for mouth or people. So you have a vessel of 8 people, which equals the word boat. Let's take a look at ancient Babylonian mythology concerning the flood. Possibly the most famous flood account, aside from the biblical record of Noah and the flood, comes from the ancient Babylonian Empire. The Gilgamesh epic, written on 12 clay tablets that date back to the 7th century BC, tells of a hero named Gilgamesh. In his search for eternal life, Gilgamesh sought out Utnapishtim, a person who was granted eternal life because he saved a boatload of animals and humans during a great flood. On the 11th tablet of this epic, a flood account is recorded that parallels the Genesis account in many areas. According to the story, the gods instructed Utnapishtim to build a boat because a terrible flood was coming. Utnapishtim built the boat, covered it with pitch, and put animals of all kinds on it, as well as certain provisions. After Utnapishtim entered the boat with his family, it rained for 6 days and nights. When the flood ended, the boat rested on Mount Nisir. After 7 days, Utnapishtim sent out a dove to see if the waters had receded. The dove came back, so he sent a swallow, which also returned. Finally, he sent out a raven, which never returned. Utnapishtim and his family finally exited the boat and sacrificed to their gods. So we just looked at a few cultural examples concerning the flood of Noah. So what is the significance of the various flood legends? The answer seems obvious. A, we have well over 200 flood legends that tell of a great flood, and possibly more than 500. B, many of the legends come from different ages and have civilizations that could not possibly have copied any of the similar legends. C, the legends were recorded long before any missionaries arrived to relate to them the Genesis account of Noah. And D, almost all civilizations have some sort of flood legend. The conclusion to be drawn from such facts is that in the distant past there was a colossal flood that forever affected the history of all civilizations. Those living soon after the flood did not have the book of Genesis to read to their descendants. Genesis was not written until several hundred years after the flood. The account of the flood was passed from one generation to the next. Many parents and grandparents told their children and grandchildren about the huge ark, the wonderful animals, and the devastating flood, long before the Genesis record ever existed. Over the years, the details of the story were altered, but many of the actual details remain the same. Traditions similar to this record are found among nearly all the nations and tribes of the human race, and this is as one would expect it to be. If that awful world catastrophe as described in the Bible actually happened, the existence of the flood traditions among the widely separated and primitive people is just what is to be expected. It is only natural that the memory of such an event was rehearsed in the ears of the children of the survivors again and again, and possibly made the basis of some religious observances. Harold W. Clark, in his volume Fossils, Flood, and Fire, commented, "Preserved in the myths and legends of almost every people on the face of the globe is the memory of the great catastrophe. While myths may not have any scientific value, yet they are significant in indicating the fact that an impression was left in the minds of the races of mankind that could not be erased." After the trappings are stripped away from the kernel of truth in the various stories, there is almost complete agreement among practically all flood accounts. A universal destruction by water of the human race and all other living things occurred. B, an ark or boat was provided as the means of escape for some. And C, a seed of mankind was provided to perpetuate humanity. As Furman Kearley once observed, these traditions agree in too many vital points not to have originated from the same factual event. In Volume 3 of his multi-volume set, The Native Races of the Pacific Slope Mythology, H. Bancroft wrote, "There never was a myth without a meaning. There is not one of these stories, no matter how silly or absurd, which was not founded on fact." Among the noted scholars of days gone by who have studied these matters in detail are such men as James G. Frazer, who wrote Folklore in the Old Testament, and William Wundt, who wrote Elements of Folk Psychology. Wundt, who did his utmost to find some kind of reasonable case for independent origins of the various flood sagas, and who had no great love for the biblical evidence, was forced to admit of the combination of all these elements into a whole the destruction of the earth by water, the rescue of a single man and seed of animals by means of a boat, etc. However, we may say without hesitation it could not have arisen twice independently. Or, as John William Dawson concluded more than a century ago, we know now that the deluge of Noah is not a mere myth or fancy of primitive man or solely a doctrine of the Hebrew Scriptures. No historical event, ancient or modern, can be more firmly established as a matter of fact than this. I'd like to personally thank everyone for watching this video. I encourage each and every one of you to share this video with others. And again, I'd like to remind you to please hit that subscribe button down below so you can be notified of future content. Thank you.